Welcome to today's webinar on multi-tenant pluggable databases. My name is Phil Ryman. I'm the Director of Business Development at Integrigy, and I'll be the moderator for this e-learning session. The speaker today is Mike Miller. Mike is Vice President, Chief Security Officer of Integrigy, and is responsible for Integrigy Security Assessment Services. For the past 16 years, Mike has been focused exclusively on Oracle eBusiness Suite and has sat on Oracle's Customer Advisory Board for Security and on Oracle's On Demand. I'll now turn it over to Mike.
Thank you, Phil. As Phil was going through, the topic today is multi-tenant pluggable databases, and what we're looking to share with you here is some research that we have been compiling over the past year or so, and this is actually the first presentation of this topic. We have I'm also speaking at Collaborate in April with some additions, probably with regard to 12.2 and the latest release of multi-tenant with that. So with regard to Integrigy, we have one slide here. This is an educational webinar. For those of you who are not familiar with us, we have two lines of business. We have services and product. The focus of Integrigy is really enterprise applications, be it PeopleSoft, Oracle eBusiness Suite, Oracle Retail, as well as databases. And with that, we assist people in security assessments, pen testing, compliance design, as well as security design services. Much, or if not most, of what we find per se in the wild over the years, the products have grown up around that, as far as being able to leave behind at client sites tools to assist them in either a 24/7 security stance with App Defend, working as an ERP application firewall, purpose-built to protect PeopleSoft and Oracle eBusiness Suite, as well as App Sentry, which is a built by and for auditors to help look at not just databases but also the ERP configurations. So one slide here with who we are, and kind of frames a little bit about what we're going to be talking with you about here next, as far as much of what we've been able to package in our research. So we're going to start with a very brief overview of multi-tenant. I think I got 2 or 3 slides on that just to frame out the conversation. We're going to spend most of our time going through the security impact of the features, and then I have some specific recommendations that the research team and myself have put together. I'm really looking at this topic from a security, IT security, cybersecurity, and audit perspective. There's a lot of features and functionality with regard to performance and hot cloning. I'm not going to be going into that today. Today we're really looking at multi-tenant through the lens of a security professional. But again, multi-tenant was new with 12c, right? Some major new features are not just multi-tenant, but also the in-memory. 12c also really laid out a large number of security improvements. So Data Vault being pre-installed, redaction, unified auditing. And you can see asterisk there. Multi-tenant is one of those additional license options. So if and when you upgrade to 12, the use of the multi-tenant does require an additional license option. Just one note, you'll see down at the bottom there that with the release of 12.2 in November, a couple months ago, that is only currently available on the Oracle Cloud, at least last I checked. I think that was late last week. So when I refer to features and functionality available in 12.2, just keep that in mind. And as far as when 12.2 would be available on premise, you'd have to follow up with your Oracle sales rep. So why Oracle Multitenant, right? So as we have been virtualizing servers over the past decade or so, virtualization is ubiquitous. Oracle is taking the perspective of, if the end goal to virtualize a server is to consolidate databases, why not think about avoiding the VM sprawl and just instead of virtualizing servers, just virtualize the database, right? And to be able to do so in a way that would introduce no requirements to change the application. So I won't belabor the benefits of virtualization, but certainly the end goal here is really to think about how to increase the efficiencies and gain economies of scale. And there's a lot to this. I think I'll prove that out as we go through the conversation here. So one slide with regard to describing this, and then I have a few graphical pictures. But I think the analogy to use here is let's think agricultural here, as far as containers, seeds, roots, and plugs. All right, so at the top or around the outside is the container database. Right, this is designed to hold guest databases, just like we have a VM host that is hosting VM images or guest servers. The Oracle documentation will refer to this a few different ways. You'll see it referred to as the container database. You'll see it also referred to as the common database, and it's also technically referred to as the CDB root. Right? So the common or container database is the container in which we're going to put guest databases. Oracle refers to these guest databases as pluggable databases. Each PDB or pluggable database is, designed at a kernel level to be sandboxed from all other PDBs. Obviously, there's much more to the security presentation here today. We'll go through how that sandboxing works. That's when it's plugged in, but just like a server that has been imaged, there's the concept of a virtualized server that's constituted, right, and in use, and a virtualized server that is just an image sitting on an operating system as a set of files. So the pluggable database, likewise, is when unplugged, is a collection of data files, and the actual database itself, if you think of the data dictionary, is represented in a manifest file, an XML file. With the release of 12.1, the max was, I think, 256 pluggable databases. With 12.2, Oracle significantly bumped that up to 4,000 pluggable database as far as the upper end max that could be stored in one container database. Sort of in between the container database and the pluggable databases is a special PDB called the seed database. The purpose of the seed database is really just to make the creation of PDBs much faster, really within a few minutes, at least in my experience. To create a PDB just basically is copying the seed database to create your new one. So it is a template, and one thing to keep in mind is do not alter, change, or anything in the PDB, though you might be tempted to. It's not supported, and we'll just say good things won't happen if you do that. So that was the singular slide here, just laying out the vocabulary, right? Let's think a little bit about how this is working in reality. That we have on the upper left there, we have the concept of a server with a container database, and inside that container database we could have pluggable databases. We could have, let's say in this case, all our test databases, right? So we have our CRM, EBS, the data warehouse, and Agile test. Also, think about it this way, in that server number 2 in the lower left-hand corner there, I can have more than one container database actually running out of the same Oracle home. And likewise, I could have multiple pluggable databases inside each container database. And you can see there I have CDB1 and CDB2. Thinking about it a different way, on the right-hand side there, I have the concept of, let's say I have a 2-node rack cluster, right? And I have a container database striped across that, and my PDBs could likewise be striped across one or just reside on a single node or not. And the benefits that we're achieving here is just like we are moving guest servers within a VM pool, we can consider moving, pluggable databases, plugging them in and unplugging them, and moving them from one container to the next. Let's say for a production migration, right? Going from a dev to a test to production, or for business continuity. Digging into this one step further, just thinking about what exactly is a container database and what are pluggable databases. This picture, I need to give credit to Toad World. I put the URL down on the bottom there. I thought it was much better than anything I found in the Oracle documentation. But really, if you think about this, there's a single SID up at the top. There's a single database. And similar to the SQL Server model as how different databases and SQL Server coexist, that's really what we're looking at here, where each pluggable database has its own system, its own temp space, and is really unaware of the other databases. As far as it is concerned, it is on a by itself, an island unto itself. But supporting that is this container database, where I have a common system global area, one SGA supporting not just the container database, which is a database in its own right, but also all the pluggable databases. And I also have the supporting processes for the container database, as you can see down at the bottom, the archive logs, control files, and data files. The point here is that there's a lot going on. Certainly, as I said, today's topic is really looking at this from a security perspective, not with regard to a lot of the performance gains or tuning or how to set up backup and recovery operations with multi-tenant. Leave that for a different set of topics for other DBAs to review. So this presentation is also going to be, as Phil was saying, recorded, and a little copy will be up on our website too. So let's now walk through the security impact of or how to start thinking about pluggable database security. So just in that, as a segue here, security is a process, right? When I say I'm looking at pluggable databases from a security perspective, I'm thinking about defense and depth. I'm thinking about concepts that, how do I set up trust but verification with people of privilege, specifically DBAs, and what could go wrong, right? Because in reality, things happen, people have a bad day, bugs occur, and what do you need to put in place to start working with pluggable databases in a secure way? So that's the entry point here. And when we started walking through our audit methodology and our configuration checklist, that's really how we developed this this presentation, is by walking through this in the lab with our existing tools and techniques. So let's start off simple. What changes with regard to the listener, right? So on one hand, nothing changes. On the other hand, there are some changes in that when you create a pluggable database, when you create a copy of a pluggable database when you create a pluggable database from a copy of the C database, or when you unplug and plug in a PDB into a container database, the listener to that file is automatically updated, right? So if you're thinking about the mechanics, that's what's happening. Each PDB is a service within the listener file. Not really going to go into it more than that, because I'm really looking at, again, from a security perspective, I've secured the listener as I would normally with a 12c database, and the difference here is that each PDB is automatically updated as a service within. With regard to the container database itself, while you can go into that, it is a database. The purpose of that database is to host other PDBs. Its purpose is to provide a framework, a control fabric, so to speak, to wrap around all your PDBs. And with that, what you are doing is using the PDB to create common objects are global objects, and we'll touch on this in later slides here with regard to users, roles, security, and audit policies. While you can go in and create tables, directories, database links, public database links, it is a database. Our thinking at the you can see there at the last slide, the last bullet point there is to question creative ideas. If you're an IT security professional, if you're an auditor on the phone here today, the purpose of the PDB, the purpose of the container database should be very simple: to host PDBs and not to support applications or to build an application in. So PDBs exist. PDBs, if you think about this picture, this graphic here, exists in most all of Oracle documentation going back many years, and that there's the concept in the data dictionary of the user views, of the all views, and the DBA views, right? So what is owned by the user, what is accessible by the user, and then all the objects that are in the database, or DBA users, DBA tables. CDB, container databases, introduces a new layer of the onion, so to speak, around all those DBA views with the CDB views, which is very straightforward. They're presenting a view of the dictionary across all the PDBs that are currently active in that container database. So the security takeaway on this is that any of your audit policies, your scripts, need to now, with the PDB option, with the multi-tenant option, now need to incorporate the CDB views. And when you work with those views, you need to be very careful with looking at two additional flags that are in those CDB views there. Certainly whether or not it's common, yes, no, and whether or not it's an Oracle maintained object, yes or no. So that's kind of something that we learned while working with our retrofitting our scripts. Startup parameters. All pluggable databases inherit their startup parameters from the container database. There is actually some restrictions here. There's a small subset of startup parameters that can be overridden at the PDB level. Those overrides, just wanted to be helpful here, those are stored in a table, the PDB SP file $. And when you start looking at system parameters, there is a new column, you can see there in the middle, is PDB modifiable, true or false? And when we were cutting the deck here, approximately 200 or so startup parameters cannot be changed, and there's about 180 or so that can be changed. And really the way to think about this, again, there's a container database, a singular database, and at that level, what cannot be changed are those options for util file dir, auditing, FIPS, or we'll say encryption. What can be changed are the options for basically control of sessions, NLS characters, etc. You need to start thinking about your database security programs, your policies, your secure configuration baselines, right? And you need to think about at a PDB level how that works, right? Because basically at the container level here, you have a one-size-fits-all, right? That's going to stamp down, right? And you need to start thinking about overrides, and not just in your audit script, but also with your monitoring. We'll touch on certainly util file dir and auditing in later slides here, because that is one of the takeaways from our research and the story that we're telling here today, as far as how pluggable databases can be used. But certainly there are restrictions with regard to startup parameters. And with regard to patching, patches are only applied to the container database. The walkaway on this is that since you can only patch the container database, you can only apply patches to the CDB, all pluggable databases, all PDBs have the exact same version, right? So if you raise your hand and ask the question, hey Mike, how do I test patches? Well, this means that you would need separate container databases. You would need to have a production production container database, and you need to have a test container database. Oracle actually gives a set of utilities. They're in the DBMS PDB package, right? And there's actually a function called check plug compatibility that you can use prior to attempting to plug in a PDB that'll raise any conflicts with regard to patch levels. But this actually works in our favor with regard to for security, because this is great for CPU patching, in that rather than attempting to apply CPUs to, let's say, 4 or 5 databases individually, you can apply it once and it will automatically be applied to all the other PDBs that are hosted currently in that container database. So this is an important takeaway, that patching all PDBs are at the same level, because patches are only applied at the container level. We now have two types of users, common and local users. Local users are the same as always, right? But common users are users that, once defined, will exist not only in the current PDBs, but any future PDBs that are created or plugged in. All of the default Oracle accounts created by the installation of Oracle, such as sys, system, CTX, those are common. And a couple things to keep in mind is that when you unplug and plug in a PDB to another container database, the common users do not move, right? You can identify common users a few different ways. There's actually if you look in CDB users, the view, there's actually a new column called common, and it's either yes or no. Oracle does give you a startup parameter that's the common user prefix, right? The default is C##, so that's a different way. If you see a user that's starting with C##, that's a common user. Again, the system, sys, and CTX, the default Oracle counts are common, but they don't have the C# prefix requirement. That startup parameter, the common user prefix, you can change that. The recommendation that Integrigy will give you is do not keep the default of C## at this point in time. Some other recommendations here: create common users sparingly, right? There is the cost of complexity. Complexity really is the is the greatest cause of insecurity, right? If you need to think about restricting common user access to specific PDBs, Oracle gives you a couple tools for that. One way to do that is to remove create session on that PDB. There's also some other commands that you can use when you create or alter the user account to whitelist PDBs as far as whether or not they have access or not. But certainly you need to think about auditing and monitoring user accounts now with a new renewed interest, right, on common users, right, and certainly keeping an eye on the Oracle maintained, because if those Oracle maintain, those default Oracle accounts that largely should be locked and expired anyway, if they become unlocked, the danger is now not just that potentially one database is compromised, all of the databases in the container database would be compromised. So certainly need to think about auditing and monitoring for common users. Can you issue DMLs to other PDBs, right? So can you issue SQL statements from one PDB to another, right? So common users have a few different ways to do this. Common users can switch to other or connect to any PDB unless they're whitelisted or restricted. With 12c, CDB users can actually query with a new addition to the SQL language with the with containers clause, and I'll give an example of that. But PDBs are sandbox. The SGA is logically virtualized, right? And even at a kernel level, what Oracle is doing is blocking dynamic is also blocking dynamic SQL. For example, if you try to execute immediate to alter the session to we'll say, bounce to another container, another PDB. You can't. Oracle is blocking that. Database links are, however, allowed, so you can build database links as you do today. You can build those links between PDBs, and you can certainly build those links between a PDB and a traditional standalone database. Oracle has now two types of roles, right? So we have as we had common users and common users and local users. We now have the concept of common roles and local roles. The same C# prefix also applies to roles. Likewise, they will exist in all current and future PDBs, very much the same. Some of the walkaways that you need to think about for security is that, again, create common roles sparingly, right? Keep the complexity simplistic. Add common roles to your audit and monitoring routines. Very important is that the multi-tenant option now has 3 out-of-the-box, we'll say, additional DBA constructs to think about, monitor, and audit for. There is a common or container database role, or a CDB DBA role. So whereas before you just had your DBA role, now you have your CDB DBA role, which, as you can imagine, is a DBA that can operate not just on the container database, but any PDB plugged into that container database. There is a PDB DBA role, which when you create a PDB or plug one in, it's going to prompt you for that, right? As far as who, the default is the PDB user. So actually, when you create a PDB, it prompts you for the PDB admin, right? And it's going to give the PD admin the PD DBA role. So you need to monitor for these new DBA roles, right? You also need to sit down, explain, and have a thorough understanding with your audit and security teams about how these are going to be used, hopefully prior to using the multi-tenant option. There are 2 types of public grants. So much of our activity when we do a database audit, we're taking a look at public grants within the database. Common public grants are granted in the CDB, and likewise are given to all PDBs within. One thing to keep in mind is that common public grants cannot be overridden within the PDB, right? So if it's public, think of this as a public or some sort of superset of public, right? Our recommendation at this point in time, avoid them, right? So though you could create a public grant at the CDB level, probably you should avoid that, and certainly audit and monitor for abuse and or the occurrence of a public common grant. Triggers, there are a couple new triggers to keep in mind as far as switching between containers, right? Before a set container and after set container, probably need to consider adding those to your audit regimes. There are 2 different types of profiles, right? Local, same as before, but also common profiles, which you, at this point in time, probably understand that they apply to all current and future PDBs. Most importantly, though, they don't move when the PDB is moved to another CDB. I'm going to come back to this as far as some recommendations, because this does allow us to enforce a common, consistent security stance with all the PDBs. 12.2 introduces a different flavor of a profile, whereas before when we spoke about a profile, an Oracle database profile, we're talking about a resource profile that either enforced password governance or helped meter out CPU utilization. A PDB lockdown profile is what Oracle is now delivering with 12.2 to actually assign to individual PDBs that help restrict certain system privileges or network access, ACLs, and we'll say where and how directories can be created. If you're looking at 12.1, you're going to have to largely manually do this. Revoke, grants, and then monitor. But again, 12.2 will at some point in time be available on premise. 12.2 is only currently available on the Oracle Database Cloud. Probably the most important thing we're going to talk about here today is how multi-tenant works with the file system, right? So one Oracle home can support more than one CDB, right? It's shared, right? So if you think about how that would work, the OS user Oracle could potentially could support one or more CDBs. So with that as the entry point, how does util file, Oracle directories, external tables, SQL loader, external procs work, right? Good question, right? The simple answer is not well. Though Oracle has provided some features and functionality in 12.2 to help with this, largely util file is open, and if you are using util file, it would mean that all PDBs would have access to that, right? Because again, util file is a starter parameter that is only able to be set at the common or container level. PDBs can only read that; they cannot override that. Likewise, with Oracle directories, I was going to do a demo of this, but for the sake of time, I cut it out. If you have two PDBs, there's nothing stopping you from if you so have the rights to create a Oracle directory in each PDB that can read and write files, and the other PDBs from the other PDB. So this means that if you are thinking about 12.1 and using multi-tenant, and your application is using util file or Oracle directories, you need to think very carefully about the common or the container DBAs, and potentially, if not, restricting only them to be able to set or create or alter Oracle directories. Util file, if you are still using util file, you're kind of out of luck. Oracle has been trying to encourage people to stop using util file and to migrate over and to use Oracle directories. Certainly Integrigy has been talking about that since very early releases of Oracle 10. But what Oracle is doing with 12.2 is that they've provided a new startup parameter, the PDB OS credential, that allows each PDB to have its own dedicated OS user. That certainly helps as far as XProc, if you think about how XProc is running external procedures, but certainly the startup parameters for the path prefix and file destination would essentially what it does is isolate the PDB files to a specific directory and or subdirectory. So as far as util file, right, it's certainly with regard to Oracle directories, those Oracle directories are going to be sandboxed in, right? So the example I gave prior with the 12.1 with one PDB being able to read-write files by creating a directory and pull files out of another PDB's neighborhood of the file system, that can't be done in 12.2 here. Oracle with Oracle 12c, Oracle rewrote auditing, right? So unified auditing is a significant rewrite of what Oracle what Oracle's referring to as traditional auditing that's been available for many decades now. With that, Oracle now is referring to pure mode and mixed mode, right? So pure mode is only unified auditing, and one key thing to keep in mind with that is that syslog is not possible. With mixed mode, which is actually the default for 12.1, 12.2, it allows both traditional and unified auditing. Oracle is talking about traditional auditing or mixed mode here as a introduction and a transition. We haven't seen anybody using unified auditing outside the lab, right? If anything, because of the syslog restriction there. So with regard to auditing and multi-tenant, how this works is that there's one alert log for the CDB. Again, the CDB is one patch level, one set of startup parameters, right? So there's one alert log supporting the CDB and all PDBs. Theoretically, you could use one or the other. You could use mixed mode or unified auditing, right? But whatever you pick applies to the CDB and all PDBs. Within each PDB, they each have their own unified audit trail, such that if you're using Splunk or Guardium, you would need to think about where and how you're going to start potentially mining sysad dollar if you are using that as your audit source. You can set up common audit policies, right, and have both common and local audit policies, but the long story made short is that common audit policies can only be created for common objects. And common audit policies are likewise not moved when you unplug and plug a PDB into another container database. A few other topics with regard to multi-tenant security. VPD policies, yes, virtual private databases work, but they're local to the PDB only as to be expected. Transparent sensitive data protection, TSPD. This is new with 12c. That basically gives you a schema to store which tables and columns hold sensitive data, aka social security numbers, credit card numbers, and a set of APIs to help work with that. Actually, by defining the sensitive data, you can then makes it easier to build fine-grained access control and virtual private databases. Those work. Transport layer security works. The only thing, as you can imagine, is that each PDB needs to have its own wallet and SSL cert. TDE, which is a licensed option, comes with Oracle Advanced Security. That works with multi-tenant. Each PDB has its own master encryption key. And one change between 12.1 and 12.2 is that now with 12.2, when you unplug and plug a database, the encryption keys are automatically extracted and stored in that XML manifest file in an encrypted manner, whereas before with 12.1, well, if you were using 12.1, you would need to import and export and import the encryption keys separately when you unplug and plug a PDB in. But certainly think about TDE is coarse-grained security, right? It really just controls access to data files, right? And just provides protection of data at rest. Oracle Data Vault, this is installed by default with 12c, right? It's additional license options to use. Its purpose is to really secure, I always say, the system users, blind DBAs from seeing sensitive data. This works, right? A few different nuances, though, that all PDBs do not need to use Data Vault. Could you just use CDB just for securing? Could you use Data Vault just to secure the container database? We're researching that. I think the answer is yes on that. And one thing to keep in mind, really unrelated to this presentation, is that if you are using Oracle Data Vault, make sure that the DB owner account never gets locked. There's a backstory to that. If you have questions and concerns with regard to Data Vault, please contact us out separately. Recommendations. So I think overall what we're looking at here is, as servers have been virtualized over the last decade or so and are now ubiquitous, how security has been introduced, how images and image provenance and the protection of image servers sitting at rest, we'll say not constituted. All of these concepts have developed and matured over the last 10 years, and we're really just with 12.1 looking at starting this within the last 2 years or so. So the entry point, and if you are serious about this, I would really strongly encourage you to go sit down with your server and your VM teams to consider their policies, their procedures, what they have in place. Is a lot of this, I think, is just starting to mature with regard to multi-tenant. So some more policy suggestions here. Make sure your applications work, right? So if your applications are dependent upon U2 file or how they're working with directories, make sure that they, I would smoke test them first, right? Make sure that whatever compliance requirements you have for the applications and the databases are met with, especially with regard to how multi-tenant is forcing you to work with auditing. And just like VM guest images, you have a solution to secure unplugged and secure unplugged PDBs. Make sure that you have policies in place and explain to your auditors as far as how the DBA roles are going to work. And also think about what I'll refer to as a no trampoline policy. And by trampoline, I'm referring to not a technical term, but the trampoline that sits in my neighbor's yard and the kids are jumping up and down on it. What we don't want to have happen with a container database is to have users bouncing potentially from one PDB to the other. So I think this is something similar to, again, how you would think about constructing security policies in around your server virtualization policy. The same is going to correlate to what you want to have in place for your PDBs. Some other things to consider, you definitely want to have your container databases segregated by the production status. Again, you're going to have a production, they all have the same patch levels, right? And if and as before, you don't want to mix prod and non-prod instances, so you're really going to need a CDB for production and another one for non-production. Customize the CDB sparingly, right? I would not suggest changing the common user prefix, right? We would also go as far as saying is remove Apex from the container database, install that in the PDBs as needed. If you are using Oracle directories now, good. If you're not, start using them. Certainly, if you are using util file, you want to figure out how fast you can move off that. 12.2 when available. If anything, I would hold, if at all possible. I think until you have that in place, you really will want certainly if your application is using directories, you're going to want that ability to segregate and fully isolate each PDB fully, not just the database, but also how the database is interacting at the operating system level. Common users and roles, minimally privileged common users, right? I would not recommend externally authenticating, right? Keep it simple. Be careful, especially about create session and set container, right? Who you're giving these to, and how and when they use them, you should be monitoring for. And again, you're doing this to help keeping people from jumping from one PDB to the next. So while multi-tenant offers some potentially security barriers to adoption, right? I think it does offer a compelling opportunity, though, to potentially strengthen security. So one of the things we talk about in our security framework, which is available up on our website here, is that as we espouse a common set of startup parameters and ways of working and auditing, what we're calling out is consistency. And we think through how a multi-tenant allows for this is that multi-tenant is actually going to allow us to create a consistent set of starter parameters, maintaining a consistent patch level, CPU patch level, right, and enforcing an inherited set of security best practices that all databases could then use as far as users' roles and profiles. So while new, we think that multi-tenant option does offer some promise here as far as a standardization tool that all components of database security could build out and use. So that's it. Tried to move through the material here as best I could. Again, there'll be a variation of this presentation at Collaborate. And Phil, do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Let's go through the first one here. Have you seen anyone using 12c Multitenant?
Close. You know, what we've seen as far as clients is really people spinning it up in their lab and going through that initial vetting process. Certainly, I think 12.2 would maybe speed that up a bit, but the answer is no.
2. How best should we secure operating system access for the PDBs?
Other than waiting for 12.2, if you're still working at 12.1, probably your best bet is to carefully look at your roles and think about revoking privileges to create directories from local users, right? And consolidate all OS activities, right? With the common user, with the container database DBAs. And so I would restrict the container user DBAs to creating directories.
Next, are you limited to only one PDD unless additional licenses?
I think to use Oracle Multitenant is option period, right? They're going to want you to have the license option. I'm not a license professional, so again, I think more about security. That's my thought, but to get the correct answer, you'd have to refer to your Oracle sales rep.
Next one. Our legacy application require UTL file to read-write files within the operating system. What should we do?
That might restrict you as to what PDBs can coexist, right? Because again, UTL file is going to be global. So even if it works, right, that might force you into using additional common databases.
Okay. And the last one, bear with me here because it's a long one. What about the operating system access and traditional auditing? If the audit mode is controlled only from the container database, does this mean each PDB would have its own syslog file, or will it be all combined?
I think I should get extra credit for answering this one. Let me think. I think the answer is if that startup parameter is only be able to be set at the container level, so if you switch it from DB to OS, then all PDBs are going to have to use OS, right? So all PDBs are going to have to be either syslog or DB, OS or DB, right? That said, I believe that I could be wrong right now, but I think you're going to get a single syslog file, not separate syslog files for each PDB, but within that consolidated syslog file, you're going to see that striped by PDB.
All right, we have one more here. PSU patching is only to the CDB. Is that correct? Our audits on CDB are finding the PSU patches, but not on the CDB.
That is correct. Patches are only applied to the common container database. That's it. So if you're looking to know the PSU level, you're only going to look at the CDB.
All right, I believe that ends it up for today. Again, we want to thank everybody for taking time out this afternoon to spend their hour with us and hopefully getting educated on multi-tenant databases on 12c. So again, now our next presentation is in March. And I don't have that date with me, sorry. We'll have another presentation in the first part of March. And then, as Mike mentioned earlier, we'll be at the Collaborative 17 in Vegas, the first part of April. And both Mike and Steve will both be there giving multiple presentations this year. And we look forward to meeting everybody if you had a chance to make it. So again, thanks for attending today and have a great rest of the week.